Is there one thing about Kurt that he would want the world to know about himself that hasn't really been talked about yet?
It's hard for me to say what he would want, but because I can't really speak for him at all. But what I would say, just having been his friend and having been in that scene, is I would think that he would be kind of embarrassed about all the sort of deification that's happened to him. Because I think he just felt like a human, like a kind, hardworking, passionate human. And that I think that he was just trying to, make friends and get his feelings out and meet people and express them and go back and forth. And, when creativity really gets going, it's not just you. It's like a whole bunch of people around together. And see, for me, just having been friends with him and stuff, I can never see him as the world's most famous person, like sometimes, or like as some giant rock star. Well, I mean, I know that he's that, but when I see it on TV and they're talking in a way that's talking about him like he's a god or something, it drives me crazy, because I'm like, no, he was a human. He had problems. He had flaws. He had sensitivities. He was wonderful. He was creative. He was dynamic.
Nirvana were huge. They were a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, I was just on vacation, actually, in California, and we saw quite a few Nirvana t-shirts. Still, and it's, what is it, 2019? Yeah, right around Christmas of 88, between, that little period between Christmas 88 and January 89 was when we were working on the Bleach record. There was a session, I think, in June of 88 where we did the Love Buzz single and a couple of other songs. And most of that stuff got re-recorded for Bleach.
I know you guys did the whole thing in about 30 hours for the whole Bleach record.
Yeah, give or take.
How was the session?
They were really prepared. We were recording on 8-track, so you don't have a lot of opportunity to overproduce things. It's got to sound good. It's got to be played good right off the bat, because, you've got like 3 drum tracks and a couple of guitar tracks and a bass track and a vocal track, and that's it. That's what you got. So it needs to be as good as it can be, because you can't rely on, overdubbing and studio trickery to make it sound big. And they were a band that had a good sound at the time. They simply sounded good, and they were good at playing their songs, and they were prepared. And Kurt was a good singer. There was no downside. I mean, all I had to do was, make sure that the sounds I got were good sounds, and then press record and get out of the way. That's what it's like recording a good band. I was the one that gave their tape to Sub Pop because I thought they were so good. I wanted people to listen to it, I was a big fan right from the moment they walked in the studio the first day. I wanted to join the band. I was, kept thinking to myself, wow, I wonder if they need a second guitarist. I'd love to play with these guys.
Did you ever ask them?
No. But I remember it crossed my mind. I was thinking, these guys, they're really good, but I had a band. And that doesn't happen that often that I'm thinking to myself, wow, it'd be fun to play with this band, But they were that kind of band.
Nirvana were peers. We were sort of the same scene. They were in an unusual circumstance in that they had gotten famous, But I still considered them peers. I considered them part of the same circle that we had all grown up in. So working with Nirvana was not intimidating in that respect. The pressure that they were under, was immediately apparent to me that they were in a different world in that regard. The first day everyone was congregated at the studio, they didn't all live in the same place. So getting them together for a meeting or whatever obviously took some wrangling. They all convened at the studio, and the very first day at the studio, someone came in with a manila envelope full of legal documents that they all had to sign. Just a stack of them, And they were everything from some functional thing like this is so that you can collect royalties on radio play in territories controlled by Australia. All right, okay, well, fine, whatever. All right, this is so they can use a photograph of you on a magazine cover to promote this thing. Okay, whatever. This is a lawsuit where somebody had a band called Nirvana and he wants to get paid off because your band is called Nirvana. Okay, here, fine, fuck it, whatever. This is some kid who broke her leg at a show and wants you to pay something extra because you were playing it. Okay, fine, fuck it, whatever. Just a stream of these things came in the very first day. I've never had to deal with anything like that in my life, But that was just, another day in the band of Nirvana for them. They just had to deal with shit like that constantly. So it was obvious to me that they were under, pressures of a different magnitude than anybody that I dealt with. And so I tried to make a point of not pressing them for any indulgences. Like, I didn't pretend to be an intimate friend with any of them. They had all these people that were trying to leech onto them and trying to weasel their way into their inner circle. I didn't want to be one of those people. They had people asking them for things constantly, mementos or indulgences or tickets or autographs or pictures. Like, I didn't want to be one of those people. So I gave them not just space, but autonomy and a distance between them and me that respected how much they already had to put up with, and that I wasn't going to be an additional burden to them.
How did your relationship start with Nirvana?
I'm pretty sure they heard some of the early Soundgarden recordings I had done, which ultimately became the Screaming Life record.
Nirvana heard that EP?
Yes, yeah. I think they would have heard that. They would have heard the Screaming Life EP, which I think came out in late 87. I could be wrong, but I think so. They called me in 1988, January 1988, and Kurt called, and he just wanted to come up and record a few songs, make a demo basically, and they didn't have a band name. And Dale Crover was playing drums with him at the time, just as a fill-in drummer. They didn't have a permanent drummer. And of course, Dale knew me. I'd known the Melvins for quite a while. Skinyard had played with them a few times. And Kurt, of course, being from Aberdeen, didn't know a lot of people in Seattle at the time, I don't think. But Dale probably, I'm thinking Dale maybe gave me a recommendation. I don't really know that. But Dale knew what I was doing and knew my band and knew the records I was making. And also, I'm pretty sure that Kurt heard some of the Soundgarden recordings I'd already done. At least so I've been told. Again, the internet, there's a lot of information out there. Make what you will of it. But in any case, he seemed to know that I was the guy he wanted to record with right then. And so they came up and recorded 10 songs with me on January 23rd, 1988. And we recorded and mixed all 10 songs in 5 hours, basically one afternoon. And some of those songs in that actual form, and I mean, I spent about an hour per song. No, 15 minutes per song mixing those songs, because I think we mixed the 10 songs in, just over 2 hours. Those mixes are the ones that ended up on Incesticide.
Really?
Yeah, which always made me think, gee, if somebody gave me a chance to, spend an extra
10 minutes,
2 or 3 hours, maybe those mixes would be even better than they are, but they're not bad mixes. They're all right. I knew what I was doing at the time, so they don't sound bad. But, I know I could have made them a little bigger, beefier or whatever, but nobody complained.
Did you know that they went ahead with, the label went ahead with making Incesticide? Were you notified of this?
Yeah, later on, of course. Yeah, of course I was. I was, and they just went ahead and used it, and I had nothing to say about it. They'd already made the decision. I did have an outtake from Bleach that I was sitting on that I had to remind them about, which was Big Long Now. I said, "Hey, you guys, there's a song here that you forgot about. Why don't you throw that on the record?" So they put that on.
There have been several brief periods where different idiomatic elements of the underground or the legitimate music scene have been brought to the surface and have been sort of skimmed by that industry, the mainstream industry. And that sort of culminated with Nirvana becoming the biggest band in the world. And Nirvana was a band very much of their local music scene, very much like peers with and fraternal with all of the other Northwest punk bands. When they became successful on an international scale and became a huge phenomenon, then that sort of started a feeding frenzy with the big record labels, where the big record labels were trying to find other like unpolished gems in the underground music scene that they could turn into commodities like that. When that feeding frenzy died down and all of the bands that were plucked from the underground into the mainstream, like very few of those had any measure of success in the mainstream.
This was at Motorsports Garage, which was like a big show. The first show when all these photographers came from England, right when grunge broke in England. And this was at the Hub Ballroom, which was at the University of Washington. And that was before they got famous. It was the same day as the other photos for Bleach. I met Kurt through Tracy Miranda, his first girlfriend in Olympia. And Tracy and I were friends when I moved to Olympia, and I was going to the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. And I used to hang out with Tracy before she started dating Kurt. She lived at a punk rock house called the Alamo on the east side of Olympia with some other people that I knew that were in the band Danger Mouse. And, it was a pretty low-key scene. We'd go see music all the time. We'd drive up to Seattle to see music just for the night. The traffic wasn't that bad yet. You could go from here to there, no problem, just for the night. And Tracy was from Tacoma, so we'd go to Tacoma a lot. And at that time, Tracy had started dating Kurt. He was from Aberdeen, so I heard about him through her. But I never met him because, Aberdeen is the opposite way from Seattle. And none of us had a lot of money or gas to go anywhere. Tracy worked at night at the Boeing cafeteria, and so she would drive to Aberdeen a lot and hang out with him. And then eventually I met him, and my friend Bruce Pavitt started Sub Pop Records. He also had gone to Evergreen State College, I think a couple years before I did. And when I was in college there, we had a student club called Gesco. And it was, we got a lot of greeners, like, they call them greeners, the people that went to Evergreen. Yeah, cool. Greeners. Bruce Pavitt used to come down and DJ, and so we'd all dance. And I think it was before Nirvana got formed. It was right around the time Nirvana got formed. The Melvins used to be our house band there.
Really?
So, yeah, Kurt was, good buddies with those guys because they were from Montesano, the town over from Aberdeen, and so everybody knew each other. So about the time I moved back to Seattle and I started doing photography, trying to do photography professionally after I got out of college, the first person that hired me was Bruce Pavitt from Sub Pop Records to do the original Nirvana single Big Cheese, and it was for their singles club, though I think they only released 1,000 copies of each one. And so the first time I actually met Kurt was Chris Novoselic and Tracy and Bruce Pavitt came by my apartment in Belltown and picked me up. And Kurt was there, and Chad Channing was the drummer, and he lived on Bainbridge Island. And then we drove down to Tacoma and took photos at the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, and that was the cover of Big Cheese. The front cover is shot at Neverland, which was near the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in the park there. And the back cover is shot where the new bridge is. They built a second bridge, so now there's a double bridge. And right where we were standing when we took the photos was right where the new bridge is. Because there used to be a park there before they built the new bridge. So anyways, that was the first day I met Kurt. We were friends. We had a lot in common. He was pretty sensitive. I was sensitive guys. He was my friend's boyfriend. So I was never interested in him in anything but just being friends. What was great about that scene were all the guys and girls hung out together and were equal. And there was a lot of ideas going back and forth because a lot of us were in college, and the kids that weren't in college were all talking about the same ideas that the kids were studying in college. We studied the meaning of life. And a lot of people that were friends with Kurt were also in that class, like Slim Moon from Kill Rock Stars Records, and a bunch of other people that are mentioned in some of the Nirvana songs. One time when I ran into him when he was famous, he was telling me about the video that they made for In Bloom and how they got the old film footage left over from the 60s, and they got the same camera that they used to film the Ed Sullivan Show, and they had like all these details, like they were all working in his mind, like he was creating this image. He had this idea about what he wanted to do, and it was really fantastic. You know, that's why I liked him, was because like every time we would hang out, we would sit down and have these big conversations about ideas and different things. Easily amused. I think that was about what I was telling Kurt, because my mom used to have me just take care of myself, because she was an artist, so she'd be like, here's a sketch pad and some pencils, just take care of yourself, you know, like. So I was always like, I've always been easily amused, like I can go anywhere and just sit around and enjoy looking at things. And like that was the conversation, and I think that's where that phrase easily amused came from. And
that's cool.
You know, so it's taken me years to sort of remember and figure that out. But I think all the Nirvana songs are like that. There's like little pieces about like different things that happen. And so a lot of them are about, like, they're all from his journals that were written when he lived in Olympia and he was in the middle of that creative milieu. The beauty of what happened in the Northwest was we were isolated. So, you know, if everyone would have been trying to get a record label in Los Angeles when they were first starting out, maybe they would have been more homogenous. But here, everybody got to do their own thing because it was a punk rock standard. So we were basing all our stuff off of, like, punk rock from, like, 10 years before, like in the 70s. Like, what was going on in England, what was going on in New York, what was going on in L.A., you know, and so there were always influences in Seattle because of that.
You know, I think that Nirvana connected to me on a real emotional level. I look back at some of the pictures I've took. It was a real emotional release, and I think Kurt and I shared some of the same experiences of dysfunctional family growing up and divorce and chronic pain.
Did you guys ever talk about that stuff?
We talked a little bit about it. There were connections there, and I think that's the lasting, what is lasting about Kurt and his legacy is that emotional connection. You know, it isn't just the music. So yeah, I still have some darkroom prints. You know, these were all made in a traditional darkroom here.
Oh yeah.
Back in the day. But now it's primarily digital prints.
Where was this famous shot of yours taken, by the way? Which club was this?
This was at the University of Washington Hub Ballroom, which is on campus at the UW.
And this was a Nirvana gig?
Yeah, this was Nirvana and...
Turn this off.
Fluid, I think. There's
this is the very famous Kurt photo, right?
Yeah, so this is Kurt on his shoulders at the Commodore Ballroom in Vancouver, and I mean, when I took this shot, I knew there was something there. I had that moment, that like tingle up the spine, but then you just keep going, and then. But when I went to develop the film, I went straight. I knew that there was something there. So he did a somersault essentially.
What did he think of the photo?
Well, they liked it enough. They put it on the back of the Smells Like Teen Spirit single. So
really,
yeah.
So when Smells Like Teen Spirit hit big, how did that affect Nirvana and by extension the scene here?
Well, you know, I mean, it just brought in a lot of work and. You know, some heartache, of course, and you know, we were in our 20s. It just kind of kept chugging along. I mean, Nirvana were out of town. The band started being out of town a lot more.
Did you guys realize it was something special when it blew up, or not till later on?
Well, I mean, we knew there was something going on, but we just figured it would just collapse at any minute, or, you know, years from now it would just be a few record collectors that would remember it all. But
Really?
yeah, I just didn't understand that it would have some sort of longevity or fit in with the history of music.
When you're taking these photos, do you ever stop to think, wow, this is a special moment? Or do you not think that when you're shooting?
When you're in the middle of shooting, you often have a sense that this was a great moment. I mean, of course, in the film days, it could take you a day or a week or whatever to find out if that was true, even if your lighting was right. Now you kind of have instant gratification.
When you recorded In Utero back in 1993, what exactly was the issue with Nirvana's label?
Long story short, the band recorded the album In Utero by hiring me directly, so I was never contractually bound to their record company in any way. That was a break in the paradigm of the way record companies wanted to do business. Record companies wanted to be the responsible party so that they could exert control over situations by withholding payment or demanding things, or, if your business depends on you exerting control over the people you work with, and one of those people has a successful record that doesn't obey that protocol, it's a dangerous precedent. I immediately started getting calls from journalists who were getting leaks from the record company. And one of those phone conversations was, I just got off the phone with Gary Gersh. He says he can't release the new Nirvana album and it's your fault. Would you like to comment? So it went to the very highest levels of their company, up to the very highest levels of the Capitol or Geffen or whoever it was at the time. There was an effort to shut down that record and make the band do it again. The band dug in their heels to an extent. They said, no, this is the record. We like the record. We want to release it. They had some minor complaints about some of the songs and they wanted to remix them. I had a conversation with the band where I said, well, I'll listen to everything, and if I feel like I can do better, then I'm happy to try to do another round of mixes or whatever. And I had a copy of the master, and so I listened to it all, and I honestly felt like we had wrung the sponge, like we had done the absolute best that we could to that music. And so I said, yeah, if you guys want to remix stuff on your own, you have my blessing, but I feel like I can't add anything to the process. And it seemed like if that instinct was indulged, that kind of second-guessing instinct was indulged, then it would be like a collapse. It would be a string of dominoes, in that, okay, we're going to remix this song because it's a single. Okay, we're going to remix this song because it's a second single. Okay, we're going to remix the whole album. Okay, we've remixed the whole album and they're still not happy. We're going to re-record the whole album. Okay, thanks for your efforts, but now we have to play by the book. So I felt like if I participated in that process, that it would cascade into a capitulation. And so I said, look, if you guys want to remix stuff on your own, you have my blessing. It's not my record, it's your record. And in the end, they did. They re-recorded some of the vocals backing vocals on one song, and they remixed a couple of songs. And the album that was released ultimately was the recordings that we did, that is, the band and I did. The bulk of the record were the original mixes that they did that were originally rejected. There were 2 or 3 songs, I forget, that were remixed and subsequently released as singles and included on the album. But the main thrust of that description is that the record that ended up in the stores is the record the band wanted people to hear. There was a slight difference between that record and the record that they ended up with at the end of the sessions, but that was their decision, and they decided that they wanted to release that album in that way. It's their record. They get to do that. I whatever like minor bruise to my ego there is that they wanted to remix some stuff is completely irrelevant to the fact that that band remained in control of that record and they released a record that they were proud of, right? That's the end of the story as far as I'm concerned. I was working for them. I was an employee, right? So like the guy that installs the toilet in your house doesn't get to tell you how to paint it, right? So that's my relationship with that band. And so I have no beef with the band. They were under extraordinary pressure. Like everyone around them was telling them that they had to play ball. Every single person in their orbit, all of their management people immediately wanted to capitulate because they were afraid for their careers. All the people that worked with them and in proximity to them at the record label, they were all afraid of their careers. Everyone at the record label was afraid that they were going to have a bad quarter if the Nirvana record wasn't a smash hit. So up the entire corporate ladder, everyone was terrified of this band making their own decisions. And in the end, it's just, the record is appreciated by their audience, and that's really all that matters. The band made a record that they liked, that they were proud of. And their audience, the people with whom they had a direct relationship, appreciated that record. And that's the end of the story. The fact that there were business concerns involved is irrelevant to me.
That's awesome.
Rock is a different aesthetic. And at times it becomes popular. Usually when there's a rock band that's very good at writing a pop song, which was what Nirvana did, people still want verses and choruses and bridges and hooks. And if rock bands deliver that, they can become popular. If the aesthetic is not going in that direction, then it's going to be more niche. And that's just how popular music has worked for decades and decades. So, that's the funny thing. Nobody really accused Nirvana of selling out. Kurt was very sensitive to that. But they were a great pop band. Guns N' Roses, pop songs. Jane's Addiction, pop songs. Pearl Jam, their hits, the big hits they've had, they're written as pop songs.
I find that pop has a connotation to it, though, in a sense of like those may be pop's like influence with rock and roll, but they're still playing their instruments. They're still really singing. I feel like when people think of pop music today, it's more like the auto-tune kind of stuff.
It is. It's more the common kind of pop music that rules the charts and that the major labels are more interested in promoting and signing is manufactured for the most part. It's made by committee. It's made electronically. That's not to say that there's not real talent involved. This is real music with real talent and real producers who know what the hell they're doing. But it's just a completely different kind of art. It's a different artistic impulse. It's a different style. It's a different genre. It's just, there's no guitars. There's no real drums. It's not so much focused on a live performing unit. It's not focused on bands, and a band is really one small part of the music world. The whole thing with rock is focused on bands and live performers playing real instruments. And that's a niche at this point. It's a big niche, and it's never going to go away as long as people want to play those instruments and scream and yell. But that's, once again, it's a niche.
Your nephew's one of the most famous people in the world. Does that change how you look at him? He's still just your nephew, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. He got popular quick.
What was it like experiencing that?
Pretty cool. Cobain getting up there.
That's amazing. Did fame change him at all, or did he still stay the same person?
Same person. He didn't buy nothing. He just bought the house in Lake Washington. That was it. He didn't even buy himself a car or anything.
Really? So he stayed basically the way he was before he was famous?
I broke his arm one time.
You broke his arm? What happened there?
When we were farting around.
Oh, jeez.
And I was shooting him up with my feet up in the air and shot him a little too high. He came down and broke his arm. Last time I got to babysit him. Oh, that's Kimmy. Sister, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. What's the little one of them? Oh, right there. That's Kurt and the baby and Courtney. When she was a baby, they used to come down here.
And that's Leland?
No, that's me there. Then
Oh, that's you.
that's Dad's on the other side. And my mom.
You said his room was over there?
Well, yeah, one of them.
Okay. Wow. So how long did Kurt live here? Like, how old was he?
Man, he must have been 12, 13. Got a whole bunch of stuff on it.
It's okay.
Hey, thanks for watching. My name is Daniel Sarkissian. I'm an independent filmmaker from Toronto.